Good morning, everyone. Since a lot of people are joining in, I think we should give them a minute more. Good morning, friends. We are on the 89th day since the country went into the lockdown. There may be some relaxations, but we as a country are still confined to our homes. Our teachers are our warriors, glad that at least parents realize this. Teachers have given their best efforts to learn online, teaching literally overnight. Friends, honest confession, while there are a million webinars happening, we thought what would be useful to our community. We researched, we spoke to over 100 educators from across the country in different demography. The answer was unanimous: train the teachers. Teacher training is something that all the governments across the globe keep on their top two charters. But I feel that it was coronavirus which helped it scale. Today we have internet, mobile phone, and laptop. And trust me, we only need these three things to be trained. While a lot of you are teaching children through online medium, why can't you all invest in learning through the same channel? Think about it. Take my advice. Take at least three courses every month. Stand up to the fear of learning at this age when the world is looking up to you all to impart learning in their children. Tell yourself that learning never stops. Learn subjects like artificial intelligence, coding, mixed realities in education, special education, or maybe a simple course of first aid. How many of you know how to give a CPR? Learn it, you might save a life. Looking at all the responses from my personal research, I was sure that for the next few months, we have to invest our time in finding world's top universities to come and teach you all about various different topics. And here we are, collaborating with Trade and Investment Queensland and Study Queensland to get University of Queensland to help our educators learn. Today, I have two very important people to introduce you all to. Gitesh Agarwal, who's a dear friend, mentor, and a respected industry veteran. Gitesh commenced as Queensland Trade and Investment Commissioner for India in September 2017. He has more than 21 years experience in international business, including executive roles in the private sector and a decade as a trade and investment advisor for Austrade. He combines keen business acumen with in-depth knowledge of multiple industries and cross-cultural relations. Welcome, Gitesh. We also have Dr. Guryon Ang, and I'm told that he is famous with the name Dr. G. So Dr. G is teaching an engagement-focused academic from the School of Biological Sciences at the University of Queensland, which is a world top 50 university, where he also completed his PhD. Apart from teaching at UQ, Dr. G spends his time working with high school teachers and senior educators across Asia Pacific, including India, to renew and refresh their teaching practices through applying modern active learning pedagogy and digital learning. He has been part of several such initiatives across many countries, and his unique delivery style has been appreciated all across. Before I hand it all over to Gitesh, a few rules that you all need to keep in mind. This is a series of 4 sessions every day starting today from 11 a.m. to 12:15 p.m. We have certificates from University of Queensland, but that's only for those educators who attend all 4 sessions. We have a tracker in place, and there will be no recorded sessions in these 4 days to catch up with your attendance. This means you all will have to be very, very careful of your gadget batteries, internet, etc. moving forward. There will be worksheets and assignments given by Dr. G to make sure we all are on the same page. There will be a 15 minutes Q&A session at the end of every day's workshop, and only questions posted in Q&A section will be picked. Trust me, ladies and gentlemen, this is a great opportunity for all of us to learn from the masters from World Top 50 University, which is University of Queensland. Over to you, Gidesh.
Thank you, Ravi. An anonymous author said, teaching is a profession that creates all professions. And Lord Waters, an eminent teacher, said, school is a building which has four walls and tomorrow inside. Good morning, teachers. Good morning, friends. A warm welcome to all the teachers and creators of tomorrow from across the country for this wonderful initiative of Educator Empowerment Program. My name is Gitesh Agarwal. I'm the Trade Commissioner for the Queensland's Business Arm, Trade and Investment Queensland, otherwise known as the Global Business Agency of the Government of Queensland. I look after the region of India, along with my colleague Ramya Mohankrishnan, who manages all of our initiatives under Study Queensland. We are extremely pleased to associate with the University of Queensland, one of the top 50 universities in the world, and ScooNews, who has connected with you in such a short span of time. To quickly give you an idea of who we are the business promotion agency of the Government of Queensland, and Study Queensland is a specific department within TIQ, which is the acronym we are known as, which deals with the international education aspect of Queensland. I want to share a little bit about where Queensland is located. I don't have a show of hands opportunity here, which I normally do. We are the northeast part of Australia, but the second largest state. We are almost half the size of India, with just about 5.3 million people. We welcome students from 160 countries through 200 education providers in 11 destinations in one state, which include rainforests, oceans, and of course, the modern front-running cities of the world. The intent of education in Queensland is the same as everywhere, imparting 21st century skills. Being widespread, we've had our own share of challenges when it comes to schooling and universities for students. Students who have to come from far off interior places have to find alternative ways. And thus over the years, Queensland has, of course, been a front runner in digital and distance education. I also am so happy to be part of today's webinar because I'm a parent myself. I have two daughters in 10th and 12th, the testing years as they call it. And ironically, with a twist of fate, both are right now doing their digital classrooms on the same bandwidth that I'm sharing with you. I was sharing with Ravi earlier when we did a test run that I'm on a broadband. I have a Wi-Fi hotspot on, and I have a Reliance digital dongle just as a backup, should anything falter. And that, my friends, is the reality of today's education. You see, you and me went to a classroom within the four walls. And they say a classroom was a place where we learn camaraderie, we learn friendship, we learn competition. We, of course, learn discipline, etiquette. And we also learned how to receive a pat on our shoulders during testing times from our teachers. They gave wings to our imagination. They bolstered our creative thinking. And of course, they led by examples. In fact, when we talk of school, we talk of teachers and those who actually encouraged us. They did, of course, keep a vigil on our behavior, our attitude and our aptitude, but overall, they created us. In the digital world, I think those would be the challenges every teacher here would be facing. We in Queensland have been proud to have been world pioneers in two areas. If you look at a space called the Learning Space by the Department of Education Queensland, it's a comprehensive e-learning environment providing secure access to an innovative range of digital tools, resources and online spaces for teaching, learning, collaborations, networking, and it's accessible to parents, students, teachers. And then there's the Impact Center by Department of Education, again in Queensland, which has 6 elements. One is inspire, model, practice, apply, connect, and transform. And under each element are concepts and related strategies for effective teaching and learning in an online environment. A lot of online resources developed for continuity in learning for teachers, students, and parents are really worth referring to. It's a rich resource of videos, worksheets, and activities. Students, parents, and for teachers during these uncertain times. We in Queensland are very privy to natural calamities like bushfires, floods, and of course now COVID. So it has, as they say, necessity is the mother of all inventions. Prepare the government to tackle all of these and keep everyone engaged. The challenges are numerous. Digital education, though democratizes education and allows us to reach far and wide, but it also means that, as Alan Toffler once said in 1980s, that illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. I think, as Ravi was alluding earlier in his opening remarks, that teachers will have to start imbibing newer ways of thinking, newer ways of teaching, newer ways of keeping their students engaged, lest there could be a next century of illiterates from this year. The fact that gadgets, connectivity, and social engagement are the areas which are not there, which we used to take for granted. These next 4 days, which is part of University of Queensland's comprehensive vision for India, we as Trade and Investment Queensland are very proud to enable it by sharing that depth of knowledge, resources, and best practices with all your teachers, the creators of tomorrow's India, the creators of global citizens. Dr. Gurian Ang, who is going to be the chief facilitator for this, is an eclectic man. I've experienced Dr. G once in Delhi, where he was a hit with all the students there. I, the other G, was of course in the background. But Dr. G became a superhero. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised a lot of students, if there was an opportunity, started referring to him as the super G man. He's what he calls himself as academic professional hybrid. He's a PhD in biological sciences. And I was reading that he's got a specific interest in how plants and insects create an interdependence to create our world, something that you are also creating. And that interdependence of students, digital, phygital, your knowledge, and your learning knowledge would create the tomorrow's world. I'm sure this is just going to be a beginning of various collaborations that will take place between you and Queensland institutions. I really hope you attend all the 4 sessions and make the best use of it. We wish you all the very best, wishing you a very pleasant, interactive learning session ahead. May this be what you create when you go back to teaching your own students. Thank you, Ravi. I now hand it over to Dr. G.
Thank you, Mr. Gitesh. And what a privilege it is this morning to be speaking to so many of you. What I wanted to do very quickly is say hello to everyone. I wanted to show you that I am real. I am in Brisbane at the moment, also like many of you working from home. We are about 4.5 hours ahead of you. So I understand it's just past 11 in the morning and it's just coming to 4 p.m. here in the afternoon in Brisbane, Australia. So I just wanted to show you that I am real, because very shortly I'm going to turn my camera off, only because we have so many of you joining us this morning. And so I thought that we wouldn't want to chew through your bandwidth, and so you can have a more smooth experience. With that, I have so many people I'd like to thank for putting together today. And so please join me in, extending a really, really big thank you to firstly ScooNews for helping us put some of this together. That is Ravi Satlani and team. Thank you to the wonderful introduction by the Trade Commissioner for Trade and Investment Queensland, Mr. Gitesh Agrawal. Also working closely with Mr. Gitesh, Ms. Remnya Mahana Krishnan from Study Queensland. I must also thank the people that represent the university based in India. And that's my wonderful colleagues, Saga Bahadur, Anaga Shetty, and Shruti Khanna, all online today as well. But most importantly, thank you all of you school leaders and educators for joining us. I saw in the comments a while ago that some of you have seen me before, and that's wonderful, and hello again. This hopefully wouldn't be the same thing we've done before, because these masterclasses are a refreshed and modernized approach into the learning environment today. So while some of the concepts, those of you that have worked with me before, while some of the concepts will be a refresher for you, the Masterclass series is going to give us an opportunity to go into a lot more depth. And what we've also done is integrate the Masterclasses with a series of quizzes that you can take after the Masterclass on a daily basis to check your learning. It also gives you an example of how you as an educator might be starting to change and shape the way in which you deliver material and authentic assessment. I will give you enough information about all of that, so please do not stress. We will very, very clearly give you all the information and instructions you need to excel over the next 4 days. Before I do that, I thought it'd be nice to give you a quick update of the University of Queensland. You heard from both Ravi and Gitesh that UQ is consistently ranked in the top 50 of global universities. And guess what? I'm very happy to announce that we've improved yet again. We've jumped up 1 position on the QS World University Rankings for 2021, and we are now ranked 46th in the world. Now, what does this mean, you see? Because some of you might be impressed by that, but if you were a scientist or a mathematician like myself, I look at a number and I want to interrogate it even more. So what if you're a top 50? What does that mean? Remember that there are over 10,000 universities in the world, and there are about 2,000 universities that are ranked on a lot of these ranking matrices. So being a top 50 university is actually putting you in the top 1% of universities. I also wanted to re-look at that in a different light. You know, many of the universities that dominate the top 100 rankings are, of course, the American universities, the European universities, particularly from the United Kingdom. What about Australian universities? Do you know that there are only 40 universities in Australia? There are only 40 universities in Australia, and 7 of us are in the world top 100. So the quality of education coming out of Australia is really, really top notch. The other thing I'd like to update you all about is everybody knows of the global quest for the coronavirus vaccine. And we at UQ were the only Australian organization tasked by the Coalition of Epidemic Preparedness Innovations to create a vaccine. And maybe some of you have attended my Biology of Viruses lecture before, which is also online, to find out more about how this vaccine works. So we're really, really excited to announce that preclinical trials actually start this week. And by September, we should have news of the success of that test, ready to mass produce a vaccine for the world. And so today's session is about the modern learner and the modern teacher. Because it's the first of our masterclass series, this really is an opportunity for us to properly define what it means to be learning and teaching today. So we describe the modern learner in a specific way, and that can inform the way in which we teach, which arguably is then also going to be called modern. On top of what I do as a researcher, so as Mr. Gitesh alluded to, by training, I am an entomologist. I study insects for a living. And so I do a lot of research in the interface between insects and plants. And many of the plants that I work with are agricultural crops that we eat. And many of the insects that I work with are the pest insects that attack those crops. But of course, I'm not here today to tell you about my research. I'm here to tell you about another arm of my job at UQ, which is as a teaching-focused academic. This image here is actually me in one of our most wonderful state schools here in Brisbane. This is Stratton State College in Brisbane, and this is a school that is in Queensland's most multicultural suburb. There are over 160 different nationalities from all walks of life. that attend school here. So can you imagine, I guess, the teacher having to deal on top of all of the typical classroom dynamics and challenges associated with the curriculum, but also dealing with all of the different cultures in this one place. And I have done lots and lots of work with the high schools in Queensland, and hopefully some elements of that you will find useful to your practice. You're wondering what a teaching-focused academic does. There aren't very many of us. There are about 2,000 academics at the university and only about 150 of us who are teaching focused. Teaching focused does not mean all we do is teach. I also do a bit of my research, and I also do a lot of other things as well. But being a teaching focus really means that you are a big part of what we call the scholarship of teaching and learning. The scholarship of teaching and learning is really the way in which we as educators learn more about modern practices, but it doesn't stop there. The scholarship of teaching and learning is how we then continue to assist all of our other colleagues in becoming better teachers themselves. And so what this means, being part of the scholarship of teaching and learning, is that there needs to be a robust framework to evaluate your practice. We will cover, and I will introduce this framework to you in our very last session, where I will leave you with some ideas on how you yourself can and should evaluate your practice. But that's chiefly what I do as a teaching-focused academic. I, of course, have the privilege of working with a lot of the high schools because Queensland in particular has very, very recently revised the senior curriculum. So this is the curriculum being taught to our year 11s and year 12s before they start university. For your interest, our year 11s are 16 years of age and our year 12s are 17 years of age. And so the earliest time you start university in Australia is at 18. So my role really is in biology. I am a biologist by training, but it's helping schools align what they teach at school with what we teach at the university. So I've worked with hundreds of biology teachers in the Asia Pacific region, mapping out that journey to ensure that what you teach in class is relevant, and some of those resources I will make available to you. And also what we teach at the university isn't completely foreign when they come and join us. Finally, I do a lot of high school engagement. I obviously had the privilege of meeting some of your best and brightest in India, but most of the time I am based here in Brisbane working with my incredible team of students. So that's me in the middle with all of my undergraduate students that assist me in a lot of what I do. So nobody ever works alone, definitely not in Queensland. See, this is me, and you can see at the extreme left, that's Mr. Gitesh. I'm there in the middle with some of India's best and brightest when we met some of them and we had a competition for them. It was such a wonderful time. Hopefully we get an opportunity to do this again in the future. Before you write anything down, please don't rush to take down anything you see on this slide. All I wanted to do first is show you that I have a dedicated slide with all of the resources from today's lecture. And these resources, this same slide will reappear at the end for you. And then you have time to take things down. So please don't worry about it now. I just wanted to tell you this now so that as we go on and there are interesting things about today's seminar that you wanted to take note of, know that I am a scientist. I will never say anything unless I can back it up with evidence. And so I've got lots and lots of resources for you. The first one there is the most important link because everything is going to be put in that link. We will make sure that this link is available to you, both in the chat, both in the Q&A, and of course I have a slide at the end to give you enough time to take down this link. All of the slides, worksheets, papers, because I understand that not all of you have a subscription to journals. So I've downloaded some papers. I think I'm able to share that to a certain extent. So I have some of these resources for you, and that's all going to be in this bit.ly link. So the schedule is as follows. Today we will very, very I guess, comprehensively define the modern learner and the implications on what it means to be a modern teacher. Tomorrow, let's discuss a little bit about work-integrated learning. But I've integrated also something that's relatively new in the teaching and learning space, and that's a little concept called mood learning. We'll talk about that tomorrow. On Wednesday, on the 24th, I'd like for us to actually do a hands-on activity. It's going to be a challenge because there's one of me and several hundred of you. So I'm going to keep things simple, but I'm going to give you the instructions for Wednesday's activity tomorrow, okay? On Wednesday, the 24th of June, on top of that activity, let's talk about authentic assessment for the modern learner by the modern teacher. And finally, on the 25th of June, on Thursday, we're going to bring all of this together. But more importantly, I'd like to give you a framework by which you can consider evaluating your practice. There is post-masterclass learning, as I suggested before. This will take the shape and form of some quizzes that you will do online. There are grades associated with this, but please know that we're not grading you. It is purely for you to direct your own learning. So you will undertake these self-directed learning post-masterclass quizzes that I will share with you at the end of today. And you will complete it. And after you complete and you've submitted it, it is automated in a way that it gives you the correct answers so that you can check that what you've learned is I guess, aligned with your responses. I guess what's important to take note of here is that when you do these quizzes, the first thing you're going to be asked is for you to provide your email address. That is your unique identifier. Please use the same email address that you used when you signed up for this masterclass series, because that will enable us to check that and match you up based on your completed quizzes, okay? And of course, at the very end, your completion certificate awaits you. I think a good starting point is here. When we think about the modern learner, I reflect and remember some 10 to 12 years ago, the proliferation in all forms of media. Times Magazine ran an article, the New York Times, Telegraph, The Guardian, USA Today, New York Times, the National Post. There was even a Harvard academic on the US radio talking about this. What's this? There was this huge proliferation of this particular fact that humans today have a shorter attention span than a goldfish. And it was it was actually bringing together lots and lots of different studies to craft this story. And so the marketing experts were really good at doing it because it attracted a lot of attention. It was attention seeking in a sense that goldfish, typically, we could measure based on animal behavior studies that the goldfish, which, work has been done on the goldfish. And if you look up the literature, the goldfish has been used as a model organism for animal behavior and learning since the early 1900s. 1908 was the first article I could find using a goldfish as an animal model to study learning. And it was somehow suggested that you could measure the attention span of this animal, because those experiments largely use a food stimulus and move the food stimulus around in the tank and measured the average time a goldfish would follow the food stimulus and then give up. And it was suggested that the attention span of the average goldfish was 9 seconds. 9 seconds, okay. And in the year 2000, there was a study done by Microsoft Canada. So this is the key, Microsoft Canada, that suggested using all of the available analytics that they had at the time. Remember, this was the year 2015, because in the year 2000, it was suggested that The average attention span of an average person was 12 seconds. In the 2015 study, the average attention span was now found to be 8 seconds. So all of these articles were running wild because goldfish, 9 seconds, human, 8 seconds. And then the joke was along the lines of, are goldfish smarter than us? We have a shorter attention span than goldfish. Now, as a scientist, obviously what you want to do is start criticizing the data. You want to have a closer look at how exactly this study was done. And so it's really, really quite funny because even though it was done in a formal way, in quite a relatively scientific way as a social science project, but it was actually data collected from, well, firstly, only 112 people, and secondly, Canadians. So this was very exclusive to a very particular group or a particular demography. And so here we have, I guess, fake news, if you like. And what you will find a lot today is misinformation being proliferated, largely because of advances in digital technology. We as teachers, we as educators really need to separate fact from fiction, bearing in mind also that the modern learner today, their first stop at finding information is where? Google, the internet, Wikipedia, okay? So I guess, obviously, this particular statement has been debunked. We know that it's not true. We know that goldfish and humans, we can't actually measure and we can't actually make meaningful comparison. But I think we will all agree that relative to when we were studying in school, I'm not very, very young, okay? Many of us that studied in school studied with pretty much the same sort of dynamic and classroom environment. And I think you would agree that compared to students of yesterday, students of today, really, you can't quantify it, but you can suggest that in terms of how much attention they're willing to give at any one point in time, we can suggest that it is different. It's different to how things used to be. Some educators will argue that it's declining because it's quantitative, right? If you are, I guess, more easily distracted than before. I like to think of that as an evolution of our attention span. Because if you ask this question, okay, so what is the attention span of the average child or the average teenager? Okay, so what is the attention span? What is it? Can you actually put a number to it? No, you cannot. You actually cannot do this. You cannot do this because there's a very, very key thing about attention. In fact, the idea of an average attention span, it's pretty meaningless. The key idea is that attention span is task dependent. Attention span is task dependent. In other words, how much attention we apply to a task, it will vary. It varies on what the task demand actually is. Okay, so that is important. It's important to remember. What does this tell us as educators? Attention span relative to task. Well, let's start learning about what our students define as tasks that are meaningful to them. And then let's find creative solutions in the classroom that utilize these tasks in order for them to learn. In other words, we need to start to reconsider our current approach to education and whether or not we need to maybe revise things up. And today I will share with you one of these solutions. Okay, I guess another thing that's interesting for those of you that want to find out more about attention and more about the psychology behind why people are interested in different things, or even the brain science behind learning, then what you need to look out for is how studies, and there are plenty of studies out there, both in clinical psychology and educational journals. But what is key is you are looking for how they measure attention, how they measure effective learning. And the key is the association that you can measure these. It's basically education physics, right? Because you can actually measure these brain waves relative to the wavelength. And so the key those of you that do go through the literature, is ensuring that the measure of success is looking at beta or gamma brain waves, because those are the wavelengths that are associated with very, very specific activities that demonstrate effective learning. If we have a look at this image over here, you can see gamma and beta waves can be measured, and they relate to very, very specific processes, including things like heightened perception, learning, problem-solving tasks, cognitive processing. Beta waves associated with being awake or being alert, alert consciousness, thinking, excitement. So really, for a clinical psychologist who wants to help teachers, well, he or she would say, design activities that improve the proliferation of these wavelengths in our students' brains. Obviously, easier said than done. But I thought I'd put this here to give you some background of how teaching is evidence-based. In other words, we are looking at studies that demonstrate things in a quantitative way. So what is the modern learner? There is a very comprehensive resource that I'll share with you, but three aspects of that resource really appeal to me, and are really, which I find important both in my classroom at the university. And the first of which is that the modern learner is an overwhelmed and distracted person. This is, of course, without a doubt, because of digital technology. We live in an age where information is ready. We live in an information-rich world. And students typically crave multiple sources of information. And so their go-to is, anything that is convenient to them, whether that is social media, if they have them, Facebook, Instagram, so on and so forth, or whether it is other forms of digital technology that's popular, like Reddit, or even specific apps that are game-based and popular amongst our students. So the modern learner is incredibly overwhelmed and incredibly distracted. So Burst in 2018 actually put this together in a really nice way, and you can go and look at it in a bit more perspective, in a bit more detail. But the data that we can use to draw this conclusion largely looks at the amount of time the average person spends on different devices, and then within those devices, what sort of applications they're using, and the amount of time spent with each application. The modern learner is also someone who wants personalized, timely, high-quality content. Google Analytics is a good spot for this because they have, oh my God, they have spreadsheets and spreadsheets of data that you can use to very quantitatively express this. We know from Google Analytics a few things, that the most popular ways in which students use to find information oftentimes includes keywords in their search, including things like something for me, or best something. And so what we can infer from the way in which people are looking for information by words like for me or for best, that suggests that content is demanded that's tailored to their needs. The other thing is Google Analytics' ability to track the amount of time spent in a frame before the user moves the frame away. And so we know that you have 7 seconds to decide whether it's for them or not. This has largely also affected quite a number of ways textbook writers design the way in which information is presented in textbooks. So we'll talk a little bit more about that on Wednesday. But I wanted to show you, again, a quantitative way. As a scientist, I don't just tell you the modern learner is this, and that without giving you a little bit of data to support, okay? And finally, the modern learner, and this I think is key, the modern learner is a needs-based learner. The modern learner is a needs-based learner. Reflect upon the time that you were at university. Okay, I'm not trying to offend anyone, but if, you know, there could more than certainly have been, you know, that you, when is learning done most? Just before the exams, right? You know, I certainly see that with my students, but particularly in a day and age when lectures are all recorded, they leave it all the way to the very, very end. I also have tips for you for that. So we are working with a needs-based learning community. I mean, even look at ourselves as education professionals in this day and age. As education practitioners, again, prior to COVID-19, would any of us have taken, you know, courses on digital learning? Probably not. And then suddenly we had an opportunity that forced us to do it because we needed to do it. So we are also needs-based learners, just like our students, okay? So a more comprehensive overview of the modern learner is provided in this link. Again, don't worry, a copy of the slides is available, so you can click on it. No need to write all this down for now. But these are the 3 things that guide my teaching philosophies, and I hope they do that for you as well. Just always bear in mind that the modern learner is a needs-based learner who is easily distracted because of the sheer amount of stimuli around their environment, their learning environment, which, as you know, we were introduced earlier this morning, goes beyond the 4 walls. It goes beyond the 4 walls, and it involves a few screens, okay? Don't forget, though, that there is a benefit to all this, because the modern learner, because a result of all of this information, what they want is high quality content. If we can give them high quality content, they will definitely learn effectively. And so now we use that to think about the implications of what it means to be a modern teacher. Okay, so if that's the modern learner that we've just defined, what does it mean to be a modern teacher? Everybody is going to have a different definition. Unfortunately, I know that there's a lot of activity in the chat, but I can't see the chat at the moment. But I can imagine that if I asked you to give a definition of what it means to be a modern teacher, if there are 500 of us, there's going to be more than certainly 500 different definitions. So here are some of my own thoughts on what it means to be a modern teacher. The modern teacher, or modern teaching, occurs out of the classroom. I am very, very fortunate to be teaching subject areas that are naturally out of the classroom. So at the university, my areas of expertise in teaching are in ecology and zoology. So zoology, the study of animals, and ecology, the study of the distributions and abundance of those animals. And typically those are courses where you have a very, very unique opportunity to take the student into the field. And when it comes to studying animals, again, you can take them to many different places like zoos or conservatories. And also in a sense of a practical setting, I have the opportunity to give our students a hands-on learning experience. So I'm lucky in that sense. For you as a teacher in a high school, it also does depend on your demographic, and it also maybe depends on the facilities available at your school. So my thoughts on modern teaching is out of the classroom, but only in a traditional sense. What I mean by out of the classroom is not necessarily physically out of the classroom, although you should do it if there's that possibility. Modern teaching is out of the classroom, but within the classroom. In other words, we're trying to find more creative ways in which we can help our students pre and post learn. Okay, so all of my classes, and certainly the teachers that I work with here in Queensland, what we've started doing is a pre-learning activity. We are conscious of the fact that we don't make pre-learning difficult, and I'll show you an example shortly. We don't make it onerous. We make pre-learning empowering so that students take ownership of their learning. And then the classroom is used for validating what they've learned. So in other words, the teacher transforms into a facilitator, which is out of the classroom. And then the classroom itself is a time to validate their learning. And the activity I'll show you very shortly is a good example of all this. Modern teaching involves authentic assessment. Hello, everyone. Am I back? Okay, I apologize for that. I'm just going to, I just got cut off and I'm happy to be back. Thank you and apologies for that. There must be so many people. Oh goodness, I can see over 600 people online. So I apologize for that and thank you all for your patience. And so we'll keep going. I might have left you off at authentic assessment. And all I wanted to say there is I'm going to give you more information about authentic assessment on Wednesday, okay? And this one here is where we were left off. And really, modern teaching is experimental and evidence-based. Now, what does this mean, okay? I know we do this a lot because we're teachers. We do this a lot. And what do we do a lot? We use our gut, right? We go on our gut. Oh, I think they'll like this. I'll do this, okay? So we do that a lot because we're teachers. And for some of us, some of you, not me, some of you, you are parents yourself. You know, even parenting, there's a lot of gut, there's a lot of instinct that you use. Modern teaching can be that. It can be a little bit experimental, but it also needs to be evidence-based, okay? Evidence-based. And what that means, I will share with you more about on Thursday when we start thinking about how we evaluate our practice. Okay, finally, modern teaching must be continuous, content-rich, and immediate. This is the key. This is the key that I think education systems and education bodies around the world are waking up to. We really need to reinvigorate the way we teach. I don't know if you agree with me, but all current curricula are so modular, such that you finish one thing 1 year, and then the next year, you don't draw anything from the previous year. And, you know, you just learn, start, stop. There is no opportunity to synergize everything, to integrate everything. And so we need to start thinking about what it means to have continuous education. Because even at university, we don't do that well. Universities were designed to be modular. So we don't do that well at all. So this is an area that I don't know what the solution is, but I would like to see a lot more work in it, okay? Education in the modern sense is very content rich because there's just so much that's available. And there is, you know, universities out there bridging the gap with high school. And so, oh my goodness, there's just so much information. But more importantly, modern learning is immediate because the kids want it there and then. And so, you know, again, this is just some thoughts for all of us, okay? Just some thoughts for all of us to think about. Again, this is my interpretation. And I hope that some of you, there are some parts that I guess you agree with or are even already starting to do in your own practice, which would be absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to offer you an example of what we do with the teachers here in Queensland and how you could perhaps maybe draw from some of these ideas. And the key here is repackaging the subject matter. So now we have a good idea of the modern learner. How can we as a modern teacher address that? So what I'd like for you to go through with you is an example of what we do with senior biology students, okay? So one of the things that senior biology students would be expected to do is to actually understand a lot of the patterns that explain why we see so many different types of animals and organisms that we share our world with. So why is there such a diversity of insects and mammals and plants and fungi? They learn about selection patterns, okay? So don't worry if you're not a biologist. The objective here is not necessarily to give you a resource that you can just use in class, but rather to give you some ideas, and hopefully there are elements of the the construction of the repackaging of subject matter here that you might find useful in your own practice. So let me show you that resource properly. This is also a link that I will share with you. This is a publicly available link that my students in year 11 and 12 have access to. And there are other resources available there, but the one I want to show you applies to our year 12 cohort. Before I show you that, I also wanted to show you that I also actually have lots and lots of other videos that might be useful. For example, this is a whole suite of videos that our students use on how to perform data analysis. So at the year 12 level, I don't know if I'm going to bring all of you back to first year statistics. Do you remember things like t-tests and regressions and standard errors and standard deviation? So our year 12s are expected to be able to perform statistical testing on the data that they collect. So we walk them through that as well as scientific writing. Those of you implementing the International Baccalaureate, that's right, for the extended essay, you might find some of this material here useful as well. But what I wanted to show you is the mandatory prac here. So a series of 6 videos are provided. So what's important here is that when you package anything for a student using digital technology, my suggestion is always to package them as modules. My experience is that students will learn effectively if these modules are not more than 10 minutes long each. So package them in 10-minute segments. Of course, 10 minutes is a guide, 11 minutes, 12 minutes, that's fine, but that's a guide, okay? These segments follow on from one another in a very, very logical way, okay? The benefit or the advantage of modularizing content is it gives you the opportunity to implement this in self-directed learning format. In other words, the student can go from one to the other on their own. This is done pre-reading. This is pre-reading or a pre-class activity that the students do in their own time. Secondly, compartmentalizing it in modules allows for the student themselves. So if you've heard of the concept of metacognition, one important aspect is how we're able to compartmentalize and partition concepts. So these modules give the student an opportunity to, in their mind, build those sort of mind maps, how the concepts are different to each other and how they lead on from each other. There is a worksheet here that the students do in tandem to the videos that they watch. So there's going to be quite a lot. So I'm going to go through the key aspects of this activity, and then hopefully in your own time, you can really, really enjoy. Okay, so they watch this first video here, and I'm not going to play it for you, but I just wanted to maybe give you the first 10 seconds of it. And, you know, there's me there and that's talking to them. But I think I want to move maybe, okay, over here. So this is about halfway through that video where we're explaining the activity to them. Now, if we look at the worksheet, this is the key. If we look at the worksheet, there are a few features. They have to watch that video first, and then they have to complete the questions in section 1, and then the answers to these questions are provided in the second video at the start. So it really validates their learning and empowers their own learning and gives them a little bit of ownership, you know, take ownership of your learning. There are 2 key features I wanted to show you here. 1, you will notice that when I write questions, this is not an exam. In fact, this assessment is not even formative. It's not even assessed, but any question is accompanied with a mark. Any question is accompanied with a score allocation. The score allocation, the way we train our kids here, is to use the score allocation not as an indicator of achievement, but rather as an indicator of how much information to provide the assessor. So the mark is basically a guide to how many words you should provide. So we're training our kids to do that, okay? So the second feature I wanted to show you here is that those of you that maybe are science teachers might appreciate this a little bit better. But as you know, that in science, oftentimes when we give a practical class, or I mean, even in any subject that you teach, there are specific lesson objectives, right? Or activity objectives. Don't tell the students what the objectives are. I know that we have that. I know we do that a lot. I know it's so common for us to go, okay, today's class, the objective is to do this, this, and this. I don't like doing that because I like the students to identify the objectives on their own. In this particular activity, the student is asked, how are they going to measure genotypic change? What is the selective pressure that is used? Which gene pool are we testing? In other words, the student is picking out information from the video that they've watched that is actually what addresses the objective of the practical, which in this case is to analyze genotypic changes for a selective pressure in a gene pool. So get the students to define those key objectives themselves. Okay, so that's one suggestion I have for you. So the other thing is that this particular resource uses play-based learning. So one of the things that the students do is they actually will play a game, and I'm sure all of you agree with me that play-based learning oftentimes is quite effective, but they also have an opportunity to look at data from the game. I'm going to just play for you now the interface of this game very, very shortly. This is only a 20-second video. You probably can't hear the guy, but I'm going to fast forward. Okay, so this is the game that they use. You can see here. Okay, so all I wanted you to see is the little interface where you saw those little circles running across the screen and the person using their fingers to tap. And that is actually the student pretending that they are the prey, and they're tapping the mice that run across the screen to look at how you as a predator will influence the evolution of the prey. Okay, so that's the game, play-based learning. But then there's also an opportunity in the video called presenting data for students to learn. So just now, hopefully in the video you saw that there was a graph, like a bell-shaped graph. That is in biology, a frequency histogram. And we use that as a way in which we measure how many individuals in the population have a specific trait. So for example, if we're looking at prey, we are able to see which particular speed the most number of individuals have that speed. And we use a frequency histogram for that. So in the worksheet, we contextualize and recontextualize. In other words, okay, it's contextualizing it for the prep that they're doing, but then recontextualizing the same stimulus, in this case, for a human disease, diabetes, okay? So this is an example of how we can modularize things. And so now I'm going to put all of this back together for you. All right, so this is some general points and some tips I have for you. When you repackage your subject matter, consider them in modular format. Between 5 to 10 minutes is a good guide. Self-directed learning is fantastic because it gives you the opportunity to empower the learning of your students. You know, we said that this is the Educator Empowerment Program. We as teachers are empowered. We don't need very much to self-motivate. In fact, we don't do it for the money, do we? Because teachers all across the world are not well paid. But we are empowered individuals. We can do that with our students too. Self-directed learning is a strategy. Reflective learning is also a strategy here. Reflective learning is also sometimes called deep learning. So deep learning occurs when there is opportunity to revisit lots of material again and again. The format where a student completes a worksheet alongside these videos allows you to do that because you revisit the material in the preceding videos, which give the answers to the questions that were done before. So this is an opportunity for reflective learning. And finally, we draw a lot of relevance, particularly useful for senior students, because we show them mark allocation. Chiefly the purpose or the intention of mark allocation is so a student knows how much to give in the response. Okay, and of course we do when we are training them up, I guess, for exam style questions. Okay, so I see a few comments about, oh right, okay, sorry, I am wearing headphones, so maybe it's the audio on the other end. Okay, so now just to recrystallize all of those specific strategies and tips so that you can hopefully take it back with you. There was an opportunity to define the objectives of the activity using self-directed learning. Again, the intention is to empower that learning or build ownership of that learning. Then, of course, I showed you an instance where we contextualize and recontextualize. So in this particular example, we were looking at frequency histograms, but then we used the same stimulus, which is also a frequency histogram, but in a different context, okay, for human disease. Now, in terms of the other videos, there's play-based learning, always makes for effective learning. In this specific example also, which is an interface that I didn't share, but those of you, I highly encourage you to play install the game and play the app, because prior to you killing all of those dots and with your finger, one thing you need to do is actually set the parameters, okay? And so for a science student, this is particularly important because it actually walks them through the design principles of an experiment. In other words, how many prey do you want? What is the mean speed? So on and so forth. So it actually gives the student an opportunity to set parameters, and in doing so, recap a lot of important experimental design principles, particularly in reference to science, okay? And then, of course, authentic assessment, which we'll talk a little bit more about on Wednesday. Okay, so this is a summary of our masterclass today. We defined that modern learning and teaching is really, really dynamic, so many elements. It's experimental, but it's also evidence-based. In other words, we will utilize what others have done as a guide. We can modify it for our needs, but again, it is based on good work done by others, and then we ourselves tell others about it. The modern learner is principally a needs-based learner responding to multiple stimuli. That is important. That's how we've defined the modern learner. And a tip is to repackage our teaching into a modular format because it allows the promotion of self-directed as well as reflective learning. What's next? Well, what's next is Q&A, but very quickly, what's next? Complete this self-directed learning quiz. Again, please don't copy this down because you might get it wrong. I, again, will send you the link and you can find the slides in that link and click on the hyperlink directly, okay? And please, there is no rush. Take your time. You can do it today, tomorrow morning. That's fine as well, okay? So tomorrow we will explore work-integrated learning. It's not always something we could do at a high school level, but we can try. There is a new concept in education called mood learning. I want to maybe give you a bit of an introduction into that and why that's something really exciting. And then finally, instructions for Wednesday's activity. So don't stress, it's all good fun, okay? With that, this again is the resource. So if there's something to take down now, this is it. So if you wanted to just copy and paste this in your browser or type it into a Word document and keep it, or just type this straight into your web browser or put it down on your notepad, this is the link. And inside the link, you will find all the resources. The link to the quiz will be found on the slides, and the slides is in this resource link here, bit.ly/. UQEEP 2020. This is the resource link, okay? So please take note of that. We'll leave it on for another minute and then we transition to Q&A. These were all of the references that we used in today's talk. Again, don't worry about them. The slides are available in this big link. So this big link is the one and only thing that you need, okay? And I was also suggested that you can get in touch with me down the track. I am more than happy to keep in touch with everyone, but I'll share my details with all of you on Thursday at the very last one where we wrap things up, okay? Okay, with that, I will come back to join you all in the main screen. And maybe now is a good time for a bit of Q&A. I hope you enjoyed the first masterclass. It gives us really an introduction to I guess, the modern learner and the modern teacher. You will now see on the screen before you a quick survey for you to rate today's masterclass. Please tell us what you think. And then we'll take some questions after everyone is done. I might have a sip of water if you don't mind.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. G. I just have one question here that's come through. They just want to be told how to get through the quiz. There's a couple of questions
Okay.
that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that question. Again, remember to go to the link and take the slides, and in the slides there's the link to the Google form. When you click on the Google form, the first thing it's going to ask you is for personal information, because we need your email and your personal particulars to match against your registration. After you've done that, then you will have the quiz proper. There are 10 questions, multiple choice questions that will basically consolidate today's session. I would do it before tomorrow's session so that it's done and dusted, okay? And then after you finish the 10 questions, you will then have an opportunity to check your score, which will give you your score out of 10, as well as the correct answers for any ones that you've missed. And I hope everybody gets 10 out of 10. Thank you all for your very, very lovely comments. Very, very happy to collaborate more with everyone. And hopefully, you know, I know not everyone joining is a high school teacher. I know not everyone joining is a science teacher, but hopefully there are elements that are useful to you and your practice. So Annika, are there any other questions for this masterclass?
Yes, there are a few, and I'm happy to start that now. So I'm just going to read them out. Question and answer session. So we have Arjun Srinivasan, who said, as an educator, I feel that conscious learning is the way forward with children. Do you think that the digital realm is actually a possibility to broaden our horizons and allow us to consider different points of view before coming to a conclusion?
Fantastic question. And I absolutely agree that conscious learning is key, right? Because, you know, it's certainly the most effective learning. The question, I think, about the role that digital technology plays in conscious learning, I think a lot more work still has to be done. Because I think you and I will agree that when you're on your phone and maybe browsing through your social media, there are a lot of things that you pick up here and there. So what we still don't know, or what we don't really still have a good grasp on, is what are the ways in which we can manipulate that? In other words, what are we looking for? How are we designing? What are we using in terms of buzzwords? What are we using in terms of design that will actually encourage or promote conscious learning? So we don't know very much about that, okay? And I guess there is a huge mismatch between online marketing and education, because typically you'd find a lot of, you know, marketing happening in digital technology that is then transferred, those same principles for marketing transferred for education. And I don't think we can do that. So I don't know if there's certainly people working on, you know, digital technology and how it shapes learning, but I don't think we know enough about that just yet. And everyone is sort of still doing their best.
Thanks for that, Dr. G. Then Akash Rathor asks, how can we provide practical knowledge in modern teaching?
Sorry, Anaga, I think you've just cut out. Can you repeat the question?
Sure. So we have Akash Rathor asking, how can we provide practical knowledge in modern teaching?
Okay, so I guess by practical knowledge, an element of that is work integrated. So realistic, authentic styles of learning. We will cover elements of that tomorrow, but I guess in a nutshell, practical learning is best achieved using active learning pedagogy. So anything that falls under the pedagogy of active learning, if you are doing it in some shape and form, I think you are having a better impact on practical learning than traditional forms of teaching and learning.
Thank you for that, Dr. G. And I'm just conscious of the time, so I'm just going to pick out a couple more questions. Could you give us, so we have Bharatati Bhattacharya asking if you could give us an example of how we can use metacognition.
Yes, metacognition is one of the areas that really fascinates me. What is metacognition for those that are, I guess, maybe new to what that word might mean? So we all know, of course, of cognition, which is, you know, that very active consciousness at any one point in time when we are performing a particular behavior. And metacognition, though, is a lot of these other parts of your brain, in fact, that actually get stimulated in the same process that we're only starting to learn about. And do you know the one thing you can do that promotes metacognitive learning? Do you know the one thing you could do? It's writing with your hand and a pen, okay? Writing really improves metacognition. Texting does not, typing does not, we've shown that. Writing improves metacognition, which is why when I deliver my lectures, so at UQ, there is still that element of traditionalism in that there are still lectures, practical sessions, tutorials like most universities. And so we can't get out of that model for, I guess, for certain reasons, but we as academics can become really creative with lectures. So all of my lecture slides have blanks in them, And the students need to find the answers and fill in those blanks as I deliver my lecture. And so that writing, they're actually writing down a keyword, not realizing that in doing so, metacognitive processes are at play. And when it comes time to revise, they go, I remember that because I wrote about it.
That's an impressive way. Thanks for that. We're getting a lot of questions about the games. So is there a link that, you know, teachers can use for different subjects as well, where they can have their students involved in games, which is going to help in learning?
Yeah, many of these games come to us by chance, and I think you will find the proliferation of games largely are not for high school, maybe for junior school, middle school, but I guess for high school, it's oftentimes very hard to find games. I'm not sure I'm not sure what the climate is like in India in the education space, but here in Australia, we do have companies that are specifically set up for play-based learning and interact with schools on a very regular basis. So what I might do is in tomorrow's masterclass, I'll put a slide up with some of those links so people can find those resources.
Thank you for that, Dr. G. And Ravi, I would just like to ask you, since we are 16 minutes over time, can we continue with some more question and answers, or should we
Sure, of course. I mean, you could pick up a couple of them, and might as well. I mean, there are some 42 questions, and now the thing is going up. So I don't know. I mean, whether, but yeah, I mean, Dr. Ang, I mean, you also have the access to the Q&A section. Could you do you mind quickly going through that particular Q&A section and finding a few relevant, because a lot of questions are similar.
Yes, I can see that. Okay, so
Let's
in
give
the
it another
interest
5
of
minutes.
time, let's cover another 2 questions.
Sure.
And everyone, please, if you have questions, don't forget that you can always email me, but we have a substantial amount of time dedicated in the very, very last masterclass, more than today, for a Q&A. Okay. I also note on the chat about the form not working. I will check that again, but hopefully I can fix that up. Okay, let me just look at the questions. Anaga, if you find something that you feel is relevant, because I haven't seen the questions at all, so I'm going through them one by one.
No problem. There's one, I can merge 2 questions.
Yeah.
They want to know if you could please elaborate on evidence-based learning, and
Yeah.
even if you could give them information about stabilizing and disruptive selection.
Great. Okay. So evidence-based learning is essentially using quantitative work that others have done, other educators have done. And on Thursday, our last masterclass, I was going to share those with you. Having said that, firstly is a framework. What is a framework that allows us to evaluate our teaching? And then secondly, what are the resources that we can go to? And what I mean by that are journals, peer-reviewed journals written by academics that work in this space that quantify different pedagogies and teaching strategies. That's evidence-based learning. In other words, you're not doing it by your gut. You're not saying, oh, I thought of this good idea, let me try it out. No, we are thinking about, has it been done before? Has it been tested in a rigorous setting? Has there been a proven track record of this type of strategy or this type of pedagogy with the demographic that I teach? Secondly, about stabilizing selection, that is completely a biological concept. So I don't want to bore teachers here that are not biology teachers, but my link with the videos, which you can access through the slides, you can go and just click on a few videos and maybe learn for yourself and give me some feedback on those online modules that I created for students. I just wanted to clarify a few logistical things. When you click on the link, the bit.ly/UQ EEP 2020, that is correct. There are only 2 documents in there. One is the journal article that talks about brainwaves, and the second is about the slides. The second one is the slides, correct? That's all. There are only 2 documents in there. The neurological stamp, which is the article about brainwaves, and the second one is the slides. Then when you open the slides, within the slides, there are links that you can click, including to my biology ones, including to the Google quiz. Okay, so hopefully, and there are no videos that will be uploaded as we introduce. We are not recording these master classes. And so you won't be able to watch them back. We apologize for that. It's just the nature of the masterclass series. Okay, thanks for that. The link on the quiz is only working on the first page. Thank you for that feedback. Please give me 10 minutes after we close this meeting and I will fix it up.
Perfect. Anaga, would you allow me to ask a couple of questions?
Sure, definitely. Ravi, over to you.
Thank you. Dr. G, Annie Natarajan is asking, could Dr. G recommend similar colleagues to himself doing research in other areas such as arts or humanities? Is that
yes, we don't have, okay, so this is where it gets a little bit interesting at UQ. We of course have our School of Education, and they are your academics that are focused on on pedagogy completely. And then you have teaching focused academics like myself that sit outside of the School of Education, that sit within a faculty that work very, very specifically on subject matter and pedagogical content knowledge. To the best of my knowledge, our arts and humanities faculties don't necessarily have a Dr. G equivalent. However, I'll keep that in mind. And given that there is interest, we might have the opportunity to get some of them to speak maybe in a future masterclass. But thanks for that. We do have those people, but I don't know if there's one that's a specialist on arts and humanities.
Perfect. Since you also mentioned you are a scientist, so I'll just pick up one last question from Vibha Sharma. She's asking, what is your call on screen time for kids? Metacognitive abilities are drastically reducing due to use of device. And this is a huge, a topic of interest for the Indian parents, because a few of the governments have actually banned online learning in the States. What are your thoughts on this?
Right. Wow. Okay. So I didn't know about that. You see, here in Australia, there are a few more liberties that our kids here take for granted, of course. Yes, I do have a particular, I guess, opinion about screen time. And, it's always an area of conflict, because we as adults, we as parents, we as teachers, we don't set a good example, do we? Because we're on the screen all the time. But I think I don't have an answer to a definitive amount of time. I think because that varies from person to person. There's a lot of evidence to show that different people use screen time in different ways, and it's advantageous for different people to have different lengths of screen time. I think it's important to strike a balance, like with all things. So I can't give you a definitive answer as to what is the length of screen time, but I do agree that there needs to be a balance. And what that means is X amount of time spent with different sources of information, different forms of learning, visual, kinesthetic, auditory, different types of learning. But what that balance might actually be, maybe, is something maybe the parent or the teacher needs to think a little bit more about, because I don't have an answer to that.
Perfect. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of the first masterclass, and I, along with all my colleagues here, look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Please be on time. Dr. Guryan is not an Indian, but he knows what Indian Standard Time is. Let's not prove him right. So let's be here right at 10:45, 10:50 also. 10 minutes in advance is something, which maybe we can have some off the record conversation with Dr. Guryan, and we will make it live tomorrow 10 minutes earlier. So early bird, first come, first serve. And also I will request all my colleagues there at University of Queensland in TIQ. If we can get a consent after this particular webinar, if we can actually publish this on YouTube, because a lot of people were facing some voice issues, and a few of them joined late. So we will request them for the permissions. And once we have the permissions, we will upload this on ScooNews YouTube handle if we get the permissions. And I think, this is something which a lot of people can also be benefited. And let's not leave only limited to 675 people who joined us today. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and see you tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Thank you, Dr. G. Thank you, Anaga. Thank you, Gitesh, if you're there. And thank you, Ramya. And thank you, Sagar and Shruti and everyone. Thank you very much. And see you all tomorrow again at 11 o'clock. Bye-bye. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Have a good day.